Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale a business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is a very special one. His name is Thiago Bonini, the founder and CEO at Vidia. Thiago, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm super honored. I know you've been having more and more Brazilians here. I'm one of the first ones, so I'm super happy to here represent my country and to be on the other side, since I'm generally a listener to this podcast.
Awesome. It's really a pleasure to host you here as well. Great conversations that we had to also prepare this conversation to make all your journey available for other fellow entrepreneurs in the community. And definitely, it's a great pleasure to have Brazil and Latam as a region more represented in the podcast. Super happy for that. So let's get to know more about Thiago and what has been after Thiago, the story behind Vidia.
Sounds good. Well, I'm going to start by saying something from my childhood. I'm a grandson of a doctor, and at first, all I really wanted was to become a doctor myself. I think gladly, because I enjoy more the business sides of things, I ended up not becoming one. But this has to some extent shaped what I currently am, which is an entrepreneur with running a health tech. So I'm still in the health space. But anyhow, I think a lot of the times to tell my story, I think a lot of the entrepreneurs will say that entrepreneurship is about making a massive decision at a certain point in your life and then pursuing full blown. And the stories are very different, right? And in my particular case, I think like starting something was a sequence of different paths that I took every time there was a major crossroad in my life, rather than this sort of moment where you make a big decision at once. So I was at first, from a professional perspective, a corporate lawyer. I did that for almost 10 years as a lawyer. And there was one point in which I had worked at the very best law firm in Brazil for many years. I had sort of a path towards maybe becoming a partner there. Everything was kind of comfortable. There was a lot of social approval in what I was doing, either from my family or friends and everything. And then an opportunity came up, an opportunity which was super uncertain. It was a company that had just started operations in Brazil, and they invested in something which at the time they called internet. They said, oh, we invest in internet companies. They didn't even speak tech at the time. That was the first time that I sort of took a decision in a crossroad. Sorry, you're going to ask something? No.
No. I was just saying right, and saying that it's very interesting your lawyer background and the story behind tech.
Yeah, that's right, and that was the first one. So I joined Naspers at the time, in which I spent 5 years. So it was also a sort of a long stint, lots of learnings. But at a certain point, I just thought I'm going to exaggerate somewhat, but a sort of a well-paid bureaucrat in some sense, because I was more of an agent rather than a principal. Wasn't really running any show. Everything was prestigious, good compensations. All my friends will say, oh, you have the perfect job and everything. And I thought, oh, maybe this is too comfortable for me. There was also a crossroad at that point in which I started to pursue something which I think made me become an entrepreneur myself. So for 1 year, I was a full-time student at the Stanford GSP. It was super exciting and fun, and lots of learnings as well. And when I was back, I joined the VC world, which is also very fun. You get to meet basically every day people with lots of energy, big ideas to change the world. You learn a lot about different markets you never heard about. So you can't really complain about a VC life in some senses, but it was at the same time kind of tough in a way that I felt like I was sort of fooling myself and fooling others in some sense, because I was giving advice to people about things that I had never done in my life, which is like running a company. And at that very same year, I was also very privileged to have my first son born. And there was a major event that shaped a lot of the way that I changed today. My first son spent 40 days in a UCI unit when he was first born. And that made me think about how precious and sort of fragile life is, that it can change from one moment to the other. And even as a father, I mean, it wasn't, my life was not directly at stake at that point. I had a son who was very young and fragile in some sense, but it made me think about my life, you know, maybe I should do something which is more connected to what I truly believe. And that's how I started to pursue and sort of investigate different business ideas. I went to spend 1 month in a startup, which was VC backed by people that I knew. That tenure ended up being 1 year, which was super helpful for me to understand how to run a business from the inside. And while I was there at this legal tech company, I started to investigate different businesses. And what made me really lean towards health, maybe was sort of myself going back to my grandfather, who was my role model in some sense. But also because I felt there was something from a rational perspective that didn't make sense, because the cost of health, of private health in Brazil was growing by 3 times inflation. And when you look at anything that grows by 3 times inflation, it's a market that is towards a crash. I mean, something is probably going to happen, a tectonic shift or something. I didn't really know what it is. Perhaps no one still really knows exactly what is going to happen. But there are now many things happening, and one of them is our company, which is Vidia. Vidia provides surgeries for people that are uninsured, people who have been diagnosed either by the public health system, which in Brazil is called SUS, or through a low-income clinic. They've been able to afford private exams and consultations, but when it comes to a surgery, they don't really have, or they didn't before Vidia have an option which was fixed price with lots of financing or payment options. And this is what we provide for the population: high quality, fixed priced, different financing options for anyone that needs a surgery and does not have a health plan.
Love it. Amazing purpose behind what you are doing today. Also, the importance of something happens in our life that makes us think, or that makes us get obsessed about solving a problem. And I told you already, but I believe that even the website of Vidia is quite clear about what is developer position and all the payment options that you can have in terms of getting access to that developer position. And having that developer position so clear, it seems easy, but it's only the ones who are in the trenches know how difficult it is to get there. So any other stuff that you'd like to share about, you know, the problem that you are solving, the solution itself, the business model, and any other insights on what Vidia is doing for the customer?
Of course, yeah. So I think there is a very important aspect to what we are doing, which is sort of about the incentives and sort of the dynamics of health here in Brazil. So basically, in most cases, there is the payer, which is generally the health plan, the health provider, which is a hospital or a clinic or individual doctors, etc. And a lot of the times, the health providers are paid as in a fee-for-service arrangement, and that makes things kind of tricky, because if you are a health provider, if you want to sort of optimize your income, your revenues, and not necessarily, if you have the incentives to do that for one reason or another, chances are you're probably going to be over-serving your patients, because the more you serve, the more revenue you get. So that's one of the things that led to this sort of 3 times inflation increase of health here in Brazil. So what we do at Vidia is we identified that there is a massive market of 160, 170 million that don't have access to health plans. And the paradox is that there is a massive idleness within operating rooms in hospitals. So private hospitals operating rooms are idle 60% of the time. So idleness is massive. They want to be able to serve these customers, but they have a hard time doing that. So one of the reasons is because if they were to sort of advertise, oh, I sell all-inclusive gallbladder stone surgery for whatever, $2,000, the health plans will knock on their door and say, oh, come on, you've been providing me services on a fee-for-service arrangement, which makes my cost much larger than that. And if I were to sort of pay as much as you're advertising, my cost will probably decrease. So it's a way for them to serve. It's good for the hospitals to create a new revenue stream. It's good for the patients, they're able to be served, and it's good for the system as a whole, given that the SUS public system is less crowded once you're able to provide these alternative solutions.
This is one of the difficult parts of really building an health tech company, right? Aligning the incentives of all the stakeholders in the process. You were the one who talked about a famous sentence from Charlie Munger to describe that kind of, and I've been researching what you said, kind of, if you have a dumb incentive system, you get dumb outcomes, or show me the incentives and I will show you the outcome. So what are your thoughts on that before we go into the playbook, how we go from stage to stage in terms of the VC game, let's say?
Of course. Yeah, I think this is a very good question. I'm a huge fan of Charlie Munger's quote, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcomes, and as you mentioned. And that applies, I guess, to everything in life, right? Whatever you create incentives towards a direction, things will go on that direction unless there is a sort of counter force somewhat changing that dynamic, right? And the way digital or health in Brazil has been delivered, it's basically a combination of wrong incentives and, of course, players that have been favored towards that. The excess of regulation, in some sense, is meant to protect consumers or patients. When you think of the private health, how does private health take place in Brazil? There is a list of procedures which must be mandatorily covered by health insurance plans. There was now a very sort of long discussed court decision about whether this list would be only suggestive or will be a obligatory list, and anything that is in addition to that would not be covered, which was the later was how the court decision took place. But fact is still a very long list, which is very good for the patients in some sense. But if you think of a system in which you want to be able to serve more and more people, maybe less regulation would allow at least to have different models of health delivery on a private system. And what makes a good system is different agents working in a rational way so that they're able to provide services to a broad range of people in whatever sector you're talking about. And once you're able to do that, you have a system that works for everyone, or at least for most people. And what happens in Brazil is that on one side, you have 45 to 50 million people that have access to health plans, which are generally very well served. And I say generally because there are certainly exceptions. And then you have 160, 170 millions in a public system, which is very, very good. It's very well designed, but it certainly does not have the resources, because it's fully funded by taxpayers' money, in order to provide health for this massive amount of people. As a matter of fact, Brazil is the only country that is bold enough, in some sense, to try to make a universal health system for more than 100 million people. I think it's very bold, I think it's very, from a sort of health, for population health perspective, very desirable, but fact is that it is overcrowded. And the only way, to my mind, to change that is changing the incentives or changing the way things are. I guess there are many people doing good things for that. There are health plans which are more focused on primary care, reducing the cost of hospitalizations, which account for 80–90% of the health plan costs. This is very good. There are companies tackling the people that have chronic diseases, for instance. This is also very good for the system. There are tech companies introducing a tech layer in incumbent health insurance. This is also very good. So we feel as Vidia, as part of this sort of trend, which is trying to change the dynamics of the system. The way we do it is by creating a new revenue stream for the hospital, in which they don't have a negative sort of incentive as towards whoever is paying. And of course, putting this idleness to work for a larger population.
Super interesting, again, super clear. Congrats on that. And what is the stage where Vidia is in terms of, funding rounds, head count, even maturity of the venture? Because we know that sometimes the rounds are not similar to kind of the funding round. Let's say it's more the stage than the round that you have raised, right?
Yeah, that's a good question, especially in a world where these lines are super blurred in terms of seed, pre-seed, Series A, and things like that. We are a seed stage company. We had the opportunity to raise around at a PowerPoint just when the pandemic was starting to reach Brazil back in the beginning of 2020. And at that point, we basically had an idea of doing that. It made a lot of sense. We had spoken with hospitals. We had spoken with a lot of people that could potentially be customers, but fact is, we didn't really know whether hospitals would sign with us at the time. We didn't really know whether we would be able to bring financing into the process. We didn't really know whether people would trust us with their health in something that is as important as a surgery for any given person, right? So all of those question marks have been solved or we have had a positive answer. So we now have 5 to 10 partner hospitals and clinics. We are in São Paulo and Rio. We have made some 300 surgeries. We launched back a year and a half ago. That was beginning of 2021. And now we are at the stage of really, our challenge is to really see how we can grow from these 300 surgeries to 300 surgeries a month, which is really a matter of finding what the right channel is, how to make this more scalable, how to make people aware that a product exists. And for that purpose, we have actually, we are finishing raising a round, which is not public yet. We are sure to make this public whenever we can, but it's meant to tackle this challenge.
Awesome, super curious to know more, and you are more than invited to come to a second round to discuss that more in detail, and also to share the progress executing Vidia and serving the ones who are not being able to be served by health insurance, and who are able to partner directly with hospital and getting help to get funded to have those surgeries. Again, super clear. And of course, you have been in investor side, and we all have a lot of playbooks, but then the reality is different for any single company. Of course, those playbooks are good because those are the benchmark, and in principle, if you do what is in the playbook, you might be in a good shape to raise the next round or to get into the next stage. So the playbooks are good, But what happens is that reality is never the playbook exactly. So we need to adapt and learn to be able to solve the issues that arise on that specific reality. So what has been some of the challenges that we have faced through the pre-seed stage into the seed stage, and even you can anticipate for the Series A stage? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have been a massive fan of Mark Andreessen's concept of nothing else matters other than PMF at the pre-Series A stage. I have said that many times. I have told entrepreneurs that. I tell that in whatever mentorships I do and things like that to entrepreneurs that are starting their journey. But fact is, it's very different whenever you're outside a company. I think when I started as I'm doing, developing my startup ourselves, fact is, it's much harder than in theory, right? So what happens is you miss not serving a misfit client, maybe, like you have a hard time sort of telling a client I'm not going to serve you. It's super hard. I mean, in health, it's even harder. It's hard to say no to a potential partnerships. As Vidia, we are approached by hospitals in different parts of Brazil. As I mentioned, we are now in São Paulo and Rio. So it's super hard whenever we have to say, oh, we are not really focusing on that particular region. We are not really focusing on that particular sort of surgery. All of these things are easy in theory, but once you need to say it, it's super hard. I think another thing which also creates a lack of focus is really sort of holding on to a team, which is not necessarily what you need at this point and at any given startup. I'm not speaking necessarily about Vidia, but something that I have seen many times. You stick to a team, you like the people, they've been in the trenches with you sometimes in the very beginning in tough times. So it's super hard for a founder or for a group of co-founders to say, oh, this is not fit anymore for us. These are just a few examples, but I mean, depending on the sector where you are, I guess in SaaS, for instance, it's super hard to not to serve different profiles of customers. One of them will have a super low monthly revenue, recurring revenue. Another one will have like 10x. I've seen cases of sometimes 100x. And then all of a sudden you're serving both of them and you don't really know what your true identity as a company is. So I think this is the biggest thing. And I think the biggest challenge for any given entrepreneur at this stage. And to my mind, what changed ever since I switched sides of the table is really realizing how hard it is in real life rather than just saying it from a sort of board perspective. I think it's much easier.
Got it. And in terms of headcount, where are you at this stage?
Yeah, we are 18 people.
18. Got it.
Yeah, we have. I would say we have been 18 people for the past almost 2 years now, year and a half now. And to my mind, this is a number which is sort of at the peak of what you have at seed stage. I think if one of the problems with a sort of a bull market in which we were living for many years is sort of really getting used to a reality which doesn't make sense at the stage where you are.
Got it. Super interesting. And in terms of, do you have co-founders? Are you a solo founder? You were mentioning that, and I remember to ask you what has been the story behind the founding team. If you are alone on that, not alone, of course, you have a team of 18 people, but a solo founder or with co-founders.
Yeah, so we are the two of us, Eduardo and I. Edu is more of a tech guy. We met each other. I mean, we had people in common for many years. My wife already knew Eduardo. They had worked together in a VC-backed company. So when I was sort of investigating things in health, so he was also interested in this particular space. Awesome. So everything made sense. We were also very lucky and happy in some sense to find right people at the very beginning. So for instance, our product manager has been with us since our second month of operation. Also, we have had a tech lead who was no longer with us, but was super important to build the initial product, was someone from basically Edu's network. It's just one of those things that helps a lot in the very beginning. We have a good mix of people who are from the health world, people who are hardcore sellers that don't necessarily come from health and sort of bring a different perspective. Tech people, we are super diverse with a big mixture of health, tech, and sort of more growth / selling profiles.
Do you still remember, so what were those first key positions that you hire, and if there is any lessons for any founders that are now raising a pre-seed round or are also at the stage that you were at the time and are thinking, so what should be the first position that I should hire for during the pre-seed stage? What should I build a business plan for? What is critical in order to achieve the milestones I need to prove in order to raise the next round or the seed round? What has been your story in a nutshell?
No, I love the question because I think it's very useful for anyone who's starting their journey to listen to this. Of course, like our experience at Vidia is not necessarily a roadmap, but I'll tell you two things. One thing that I really sort of recommend, and one thing that we should have done somewhat differently to my mind. So I definitely recommend being product centric from the outset. As I mentioned, our product manager started in the company in our very second month, and that makes a huge difference. In particular, in our case, we were sort of building the product from scratch, and we introduced a sort of the correct product mindset from the outset, which is really focusing on the customer, doing the proper discovery and things like that. So a lot of the times companies will start to build a product based on a vision of founders, which is very, of course, useful and valuable in some sense. But you ought to have the vision and then I think endure a process which is more like lean startup / inspired / other books. I mean, these are two good sources in my mind. I really like Inspired, for instance, as a book from a product management perspective, and then sort of start to build a product. One thing that I think we would have done somewhat differently, it was like our initial product was built over a period of some 7 to 8 months. I think it would have built a more MVP kind of thing. I think we did a lot of things right, but when it came to build the first product, we just assumed we needed to go one step ahead and try to sort of deliver things which were not necessarily validated.
It might be related with that fear. Again, it's an health tech company, so we need to create some reputation. The product needs to be good enough to ensure that we are serving well our patients and also, of course, the hospitals as our partners. So I think that those fears also come into play, right?
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, Mike. You're spot on.
Awesome. And in terms of the split, any other, so you would say that product manager is critical at that stage, and also to go through a process, and of course having a good balance between what is the intuition of the founders and what are we listening from the customer itself, and having a party that is neutral in that process, which is the product manager, which is kind of marrying the founder's vision, that sometimes the customers can't tell what they need because they can't see it. They never seen that solution in the market. but at the same time, we can't just go with the vision without validating if the customer is really interested on that, or reducing a little bit the risk, or even improving the initial mock-up or vision or draft that the founders have in mind. Is there any other position that you think was critical in the beginning for other founders that are starting their ventures now?
Yeah, I think the product side, that's what I would believe. And then you build your technology team out of that sort of the actual need, rather than, oh, let's build a full-blown sort of tech team. I think you start with product and then you go for a tech team. That's what we would do if we were to start over. We fairly did that, but I think not as focused as we should. And I think maybe another thing is really sort of being a sort of sales organization from the outset. I think there are many things which relate to product market fit, which are sort of related to the discovery sales and marketing, but sales for sure. So I would definitely, if we were to go back, do lots of discoveries on the sales part in parallel to the product construction. I think it fits super well.
Great point, and that's what you said earlier on our conversation. You need to focus before Series A on product market fit, and it's all about the search exercise. And what you were saying, we need to discover more on the product side and on the marketing and sales side. And definitely, in order to get to that Series A, you need to get a revenue machine that is possible to be repeatable, profitable, and scalable. And until then, you need to be able to search and have all the pieces clicking. And of course, product, marketing, sales, CS, I would say, are critical pieces to create that revenue machine. So super interesting point. So let's go for a more macro kind of topic. As you said, we are covering more and more the Brazilian ecosystem. I think it's interesting to do a reflection for the ones who are listening from Brazil in the show and from the LATAM region, but also for the ones who are listening from the US, Europe, or Asia, or any other parts of the world. So what are your views, your takeaways on where the Brazilian ecosystem is and what has been the progress, the challenges? So what are your thoughts on the Brazilian ecosystem, to be brief?
Yeah, I think there are very good reasons to celebrate how the system has evolved. I started with Naspers back in 2010. So 12 years ago was completely different. We didn't have an ecosystem, basically. We had a Swiss cheese kind of thing, lots of holes. We did not have exits. We did not have good schools. We did not have, we had a very small amount of well-qualified people going for the entrepreneurial path. We didn't have institutional investors in the different stages of that the system needed in order to become to do the following rounds. I mean, you can't really do a Series A and not expect to be able to need cash in 18 to 24 months. So there were different holes, right? One of them was also community, like things like Google for Startups, Itaú's Kubo, all of these things, even accelerators were really just starting at that point. So we evolved a lot. I mean, I think we now check all those boxes gladly. There were many sort of different events that helped that. And fact is, we can't really complain. One thing that I believe a lot, and we have discussed before, and I really wanted to mention because I feel it would be useful for people to understand. I'm part of a group of people that won't be sitting just waiting for the government to make their lives better, right? I mean, and it's something that in our country, in Brazil, it has been somewhat of a stance of a lot of people. Oh, they believe the government will provide them with a better life, so you need to vote for better people, and decades go by and nothing changes. So I think entrepreneurship is an excellent way to create part of these social changes. The most obvious things are jobs, innovation, competitiveness. I think it also qualifies people very quickly.
Right.
I see a lot of people that are coming out of university or not even going to university and having the opportunity to work in a startup. And over a period of sometimes 3 to 5 years, the person has the opportunity to learn customer experience, to learn sales, to learn product management. Sometimes if the person wants to go on the technical side, learn data and tech skills. I think by itself, this is very, very powerful. And if we didn't have that in Brazil, the ecosystem that we currently do, I'm sure the country would not be as good in terms of development as it is today. We would certainly be in a worse position in many, many senses. Not that long ago, it would be super hard to imagine a tech company within the largest companies in the region. And as we all know, Mercado Livre has already been the largest company in the region. I think it's not at this very moment, just because of the volatility of the market, but still, it's a top 10 or top companies in the region. So it's a very good reason to celebrate in many, many senses. And one of the things that I believe, Mike, I really wanted to tell, because I want to incentivize more people to have this sort of mindset, because I think it helps the country in general, is the power of value creation and value sharing within startups. So in the old industries, you sort of, as an entrepreneur or as a company owner, you sort of buy someone's time. So you pay the least you can do in order to get the largest amount of work from that person. And at the end of the month, you're going to pay a salary. And if the person goes well, it makes a person or a group of people rich, right? This is how it happens in most of cases in the old industries. And I think from a sort of political perspective, it's not necessary that I have anything against that, but it's just over time, it doesn't create value for society as a whole. And it just bothers me in some sense. So I think that in a startup is potentially and usually much more balanced in terms of how value is shared. And one of the most obvious things, which is more and more popular here in Brazil, is really stock option plans, right? And I come from a family which has been impacted by that. My father was a HR manager within an engineering company. So he was working class, he had a good position, but it wasn't like he was a C-level or whatever. And as part of that, he was able to, because the company believed in sort of value sharing, he sort of had a species of stock option. It wasn't exactly a sort of Silicon Valley one with a cliff and investing and things like that. It was somewhat different. But he was able to provide, to pay for my university, for instance, and maybe to provide for our families, other than his salary based on that. I was myself also happy to be in a company that did that and had a very strong position on value sharing, which was Naspers. At the time, Naspers stock was really valued at whatever was Tencent stock. More and more, Naspers is creating lots of businesses outside of Tencent. At the time, we already had, but at the time, Tencent was still a very large part of what the value of Naspers would be. So I was also benefited from that. That was actually one of the reasons I was able to pursue a master's abroad and really leave the company and say, I have the freedom to choose whatever I'm going to do next, because I don't need to repay my employer who is sponsoring a master's degree at a fantastic university. So that gave me a lot of freedom. And to my mind, well, 2/3 of the people at Vidia have stock option now. And
Well done.
hopefully they will be the next generation of entrepreneurs, or that money will create them more freedom to do whatever they want to do, to pursue their passion, to provide them with a better life. And this is something that more and more I want to write about. I want to sort of incentivize other entrepreneurs to do the same. And hopefully over a period of 5 to 10 years, we'll be in an even better shape in that sense.
Love it. It's really using entrepreneurship as an engine to solve the problems of society, and the most important problems of society, and of course rewarding the ones who help to solve those problems, giving them the freedom and the option to. Sometimes I think it's even interesting that if you give those entrepreneurs the tools, and if they succeed in their first venture, they can go into a second venture to solving even more meaningful problems, because they don't care about the money anymore. It's really about the purpose of the venture. That's why we see that very rich entrepreneurs who are able even to work just non-profit, because they don't care anymore about the money involved. They are so rich, so abundant, that they really care about solving something that can really improve lives. So super inspiring to see entrepreneurship as that vehicle. So we came into the segment of the show that I ask you a quick question and you give me a quick answer. And are you ready to go with
Absolutely,
that one?
yeah. Let's do it, yeah.
So if you would have the chance of having a coffee with Thiago at the beginning of Vidia, what advice would you offer to your younger self?
Spend more time investigating your passion. And once you find it, don't wait to pursue it.
Awesome. What are you the most proud on your journey so far?
I think it's something I spoken in the beginning, like in the crossroads, haven't taken the non-obvious paths, which were more related to just the way I am and not perhaps someone else.
Love it. Worst advice ever received?
This is bad. The world will believe, oh, you believe in a world that doesn't exist. Don't bother spending time creating it. Someone once told me that, and I think it was the worst advice, but in some sense was super good, because it just made me more energetic to go for that path.
That's a good way of changing side of this question and making it a very positive one. Well done. So, and now resources. Favorite book?
I'm gonna say one on the professional side and one on the personal side.
Yeah,
the professional
absolutely.
side is Jim Collis's Good to Great. I think it's a very good mix of strategy, culture, and leadership. Very well condensed, well written, fully based on data. And the one, I am not sure whether there is an English version to it. It's called in Portuguese Seja Monge, or Be a Monk.
Yeah.
It's by a Brazilian monk called Satyanata. It's been the book that influenced me the most from a personal perspective.
Love it. And that's one of the books that my wife has read. So I need to pick that one and read it myself. And I have the advantage of being able to read it in Portuguese. So awesome. But I'm sure there is an English version on that one. So favorite movie or series?
I'm going to go on the series path. It's a PBS documentary series / interview. It's Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth. There's also a book, which is also very famous. It tells the story of the hero's journey, which I think it connects very, very well with anyone's life and certainly with the entrepreneur's life.
I'm curious to... I love the resources part. I'm creating a huge resource list of things that I need to read and listen. I'm taking care of them. But super interesting. Favorite podcast excluding this one?
If you don't mind, I'll go for two. Also, one in Portuguese and one in English.
Absolutely.
since I enjoy a lot development, a lot sort of personal / professional development matters, I'm going to go for Jerry Colonna's The Reboot podcast.
Yeah.
I think it's very good. And then the Portuguese one, Paulo Silveira and Rodrigo Dantas, Like a Boss. These are two of the ones that I listen to the most.
Love it. So we are aligned on those two. Of course, Like a Boss is a recent one for me, but really enjoying to listen more and more of that one. Really good, very well done job. So Thiago, it was really a pleasure to host you. Thank you so much for making the time, and of course you are always more than welcome to come to the show, and we wish you all the best in the meantime.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm a huge fan of the podcast. I'm a huge fan of what you're building on a professional side. So keep it up, and you're also building a better world in those two instances. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And to our community, as you see, we keep bringing you very inspiring people to help you out on your journey, to make it a little bit easier. We know that it's a difficult path to go through, but as we saw today, the purpose also helps a lot to go through those ups and downs of the entrepreneurial journey. See you soon and keep scaling.